This morning, the murder trial began for Donna Adelson, and if you're not familiar with this Florida grandmother's murder-for-hire plot that's already resulted in 4 convictions, don't worry, I'm going to tell you everything. To explain why Donna Adelson is accused of murder, we have to first understand the killing of her former son-in-law, Dan Markel. On July 18th, 2014, Dan Markel's neighbor in Tallahassee, Florida, hears a loud bang. The neighbor saw Dan Markel's car sitting in the driveway of his home, and when he approached, he realized that Dan Markel had been shot. The neighbor called 911 to report the incident and also said that he saw a silver or white Prius leaving the neighborhood quickly. EMS arrived after about a 20-minute delay due to a dispatching error, and they took Dan Markel to the hospital where he died the next day. At the time of his death, Dan Markel and Wendy Adelson had been fighting a custody battle over their 2 children. In 2012, Wendy Adelson had packed up the children, left divorce papers on the bed, and left the home. Wendy wanted to take the kids 6 hours away to South Florida to be closer to her own family, and Dan Markel was like, absolutely not. And the court agreed with Dan. They basically said, if the kids are happy and healthy where they are, you can't just take them. And there was definitely conflict between the Adelson family and Dan Markel. In fact, Markel in early 2014 had asked for a hearing to be scheduled to make it so Donna Adelson could no longer see the children unsupervised. The hearing was scheduled, but it never took place because Dan Markel was murdered before the hearing could happen. Markel had been a well-known and respected Florida State University law professor, and investigators looked into and cleared his former students and colleagues, etc. They also obviously called in his ex-wife Wendy for an interview. She told investigators about her divorce issues and generally complied with their investigation. She let them look at her phone, she gave them fingerprints, she let them photograph her, all without a lawyer, I believe. Which is crazy, don't do any of that ever, even if you're innocent, ask for a lawyer immediately. Wendy also talked about her brother Charlie Adelson. She said that Charlie would make jokes about hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel and resolve her problem. She said that after their divorce, he gave her a big TV and he said, here, this is cheaper than hiring a hitman. Wendy also brought up this guy that she had been dating whose name is Jeffrey Lacasse. They had started dating in 2013, about a year after her divorce from Dan Markel, and they broke up about a week before Dan's murder. Wendy also calls her mother Donna while she's being interviewed by the police, and they listen to that conversation as well. And Wendy says she's relieved to hear that her mother is surprised by Dan Markel's death because it means that they didn't have anything to do with it. She said that her parents had more reason than anybody to not like Dan Markel because he had hurt her. After the interview with Wendy, the police do interview Jeffrey Lacasse, and he's like, you guys should be looking at Charlie Adelson. Jeffrey at this point is clearly head over heels for Wendy, but he can't deny some of the disturbing things that Charlie has said about Dan Markel. Jeffrey told police that in 2013, Wendy had revealed to him that her brother said that he could hire a hitman for $15,000 to kill Dan Markel. And at this point, the police kind of have a theory of what happened here, but they really don't have any hard evidence, so they have to go back to the beginning. And they think about that neighbor that called and said there was a silver or white Prius. By retracing Dan Markel's steps the morning that he was shot, police are able to find security footage of this Prius. Not only do they find the Prius, but it's also a very specific color called silver pine mica. This is not the exact car, this is just the color example. And you can see the side view mirror is painted the same color as the body of the car. And police had noticed that on the Prius that was following Dan Markel, one of the side view mirrors is black and the other one is painted the same as the body of the car. They also noticed that the car had a toll pass on it and they were able to pull up information. With all of these identifying features, they were able to figure out that this was a rental car from South Florida. Police determined that the car was rented by somebody named Luis Rivera, who was a leader in the North Miami branch of the Latin King. The rental agreement also listed a second phone number. It was labeled only as brother, and they determined it belonged to Sigfredo Garcia. Garcia and Rivera had been childhood friends, and Garcia had a very interesting connection to the Adelson family. The police had been trying to figure out why these 2 random men drove 6 hours north to Tallahassee and killed a Florida State University law professor. And this is where Katie Magbanua comes in. Not only was Katie dating Charlie Adelson from 2013 to about 2015, she also has 2 children with Sigfredo Garcia. Police had already been aware about Katie Magbanua after looking into the Adelson family, but this connection was a big deal. The Adelson family is wealthy, with both Charlie and his father Harvey working for the family dental practice. Police had been suspicious because they found paychecks to Katie Magbanua from the Adelson family dental practice, but they couldn't find record of her actually being employed there. Investigators looked and they couldn't find any kind of work schedule for her or employee paperwork, and later Katie would testify that she did not work at this office. Eventually, Katie and Sigfredo were both arrested. Luis was already incarcerated on unrelated charges, so they just charged him for this murder as well while he was in prison. With all 3 of them being in prison, one of them was bound to take a deal, and it was Luis. Rivera became a witness for the prosecution, and he told them everything. He said that he had driven the car, Sigfredo had had shot Dan Markel and that Katie had given them the instruction. This was in late 2016, over 2 years after Dan Markel was shot, and they still have no solid proof of any Adelson family involvement in the crime. But investigators still very much believe that they were involved, so they go back and look further. They pull emails from Donna Adelson and Wendy Adelson from around the time of the divorce, where Wendy Adelson is saying, let's go low. Dan Markel's Jewish faith is very important to him, and at one point, Donna Adelson, who is also of Jewish faith, suggests that they change the religion of the grandchildren to Christianity, have them baptized to mess with Dan Markel. Donna said, let's show him what would make him absolutely miserable. Donna also allegedly suggested that they pay Dan Markel $1 million so he will go away and they can just have custody of the kids. Remember when I said that Dan Markel had been awaiting a hearing to prevent Donna Adelson from seeing the grandchildren alone? With all of this information, I don't find that surprising at all. But with very little concrete evidence, the FBI says, let's just do a sting operation. And they have an undercover agent approach Donna Adelson. He basically tells Donna, look, we know you're taking care of Katie and you're taking care of Sigfredo, but you're not taking care of Rivera, and we want $5,000. He hands Donna a piece of paper with a statement on it that's basically a blackmail or extortion letter. And he's like, look, I know we took care of your problems up north, so now you're going to take care of some of our problems. And in the moment, Donna plays dumb, but she immediately calls Charlie Adelson. She's like, a man just handed me paperwork, and I think it has to do with us. He's like, what do you mean? She's like, I think you know what I mean. Like, it's not subtle. And then Charlie immediately calls Katie and is like, why is somebody harassing my mom? Mind y'all, every single one of these phone conversations is being recorded because the FBI has all of these people wiretapped. And before Magbanaw's arrest, Charlie meets up with her at a restaurant. The audio on this is absolutely terrible, but he's basically telling Katie, kill this guy if you have to. If you don't, I will. Luis Rivera pled guilty as part of his sweetheart deal, but Sigfredo and Katie both went to trial. They found Sigfredo guilty, but they were hung on charges for Katie. But the state was not going to give up, and they prosecuted her again. And Katie's retrial was delayed over and over because of a combination of the pandemic and other issues. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, Dan Markel's parents, Ruth and Phil, want to see their grandkids. Directly after Dan Markel was murdered, Wendy Adelson did take the children to South Florida, getting exactly what she wanted all along. And by 2016, they cut off contact with the grandparents on Dan Markel's side. At this point, Wendy Adelson chooses to change the last name of the children from Markel to Adelson. She says it's for security reasons. I don't think that makes any sense. Dan's parents decide to take legal action, eventually getting the Markel Act passed in Florida. This legislation basically says that if a child's parent dies and the other parent is found guilty of a crime against the first parent, the grandparents of the deceased parent will get access to the children, maybe if a court allows. This act passes in early 2022, and the Adelsons allow the Markels to come see the grandchildren for the first time in a long time. During all of this, an audio expert from the CIA is ripping apart the audio recording of Charlie Adelson and Katie at the restaurant. The recording had been so bad previously that they could not separate out whose voices were what to get context, but this expert with 10 years under his belt was able to isolate their voices. And in the newly released audio, you can hear Charlie tell Katie that if he was actually worried about being arrested for this crime, that he'd be on a plane out of there. Foreshadowing. He also expresses his confusion as to why they're going after Donna Adelson and not him. And with this new audio evidence, 2 months later, they finally arrest Charlie Adelson. Not long after his arrest, Katie is convicted at her second trial, and she decides to become a state witness too, because why not? She testifies that Charlie came up with the whole idea to kill Dan and gives a ton of details to the court. And at Charlie's trial, he's like, actually, there's two crimes happening here. He alleges that he had nothing to do with Dan Markel's murder and that all of these people were trying to extort him for money. He said that Katie had told Sigfredo about the problems with Dan Markel, and Sigfredo chose to go kill Markel and then extort the Adelson family for money afterwards, saying that he had heard that Donna Adelson was willing to pay Dan Markel $1 million to leave the kids alone, and now he wanted that $1 million for killing him. The prosecution is like, how would this make any sense? Why would he go kill this crime without even the promise of any money? Why wouldn't he just come rob you? And Katie had testified that Charlie handed her over $138,000 in cash, which was stapled together, and for some reason, Charlie was known to be stapling his stacks of cash together. Rich people are weird. Anyway, they also convict Charlie Adelson, and a week later, he's on the phone with his mom. And the prison phone line picks up something very interesting. He's having a whole conversation about leaving town, going to Vietnam, and how they don't extradite to the US. Investigators hear this, and they look up records and realize that Harvey and Donna Adelson have purchased one-way tickets to Vietnam the day after Charlie was convicted. They rush to the airport and catch them just as they're about to board their one-way flight out of the country. This whole trial was supposed to start last year, but on the first day of Donna's trial, her lawyer was like, I actually can't be your lawyer lawyer anymore. Donna's lawyer had been Charlie's lawyer in Charlie's trial. And because this lawyer would have to cross-examine Charlie during Donna's trial, Charlie was like, that's a conflict of interest, and he did not want to waive attorney-client privilege. Those are all the details I could possibly fit in this video. Like I said, jury selection started this morning, so whenever that's done, opening statements will begin. Love you guys, drink water, bye!